Hi, my name is Aram. I'm founder of BioRower and Aram Training. Today I'd like to do something that we got a lot of requests for doing. A basic introduction into rowing technique, what to look for, might also be interesting for advanced athletes. Demonstrating a bit of the philosophy we have and just the things we learned. I don't know it all, but there's some experience I have and I'd like to share it today. In rowing, there are quite a few misconceptions, from my point of view. I think that a lot of people just tend to mix up symptoms and causes. What do I mean with this? For example, you get someone who lifts up the upper body at the catch very early, so this looks like, whoop, early lift up at the catch. The question is, how do you correct it? Is the right way to correct it to say, okay, let your upper body stay up front? Then how are you going to do this? There are certain forces working inside your body that need to be changed before we can focus on letting the upper body stay forward. So there's a certain procedure we need to follow. So in a rowing stroke, you have certain parts. The first part is the finish. The finish is where you can do it all right or you can do it all wrong. What is it that we look for at the finish? First of all, you need a connection between your foot stretchers and your blade. Finish is the last part where your blade is just about to leave the water, but not quite yet. It is the last part of the stroke, the last part of the so-called pulling. I rather call it pushing the boat away from yourself. I look for certain things. First of all, your elbows need to point outwards. Why? Because your inboards are going in half circles. And if you want to support the way the inboards are going, your hands need to follow a half circle routine too. So if you want to apply maximum force, your hands will have to be in the right angle. So you start with this. Some athletes pull to the finish like this. This way no one can apply force, so they have to be straight. I mean this part here. And some athletes pull towards or very close to the body, which doesn't work either. You want to support in half circles, so you go out in half circles. The question I get a lot, whether or not your shoulders have to go back at the finish. Well, my opinion is that the shoulders do not make your stroke any longer. And even if you could manage to make your stroke a bit longer with bringing the shoulders farther back, the question is, can you still keep the force connection between your hand and your feet if you do so? I doubt it. I've never seen it. There was no force curve in the boat or on the BioRower that would prove this. So your shoulders should stay in a natural position. This doesn't work. This should also not be the case. Your shoulder will automatically be in the right position if you really focus on having full tension in the body here in the lower trunk, having your hands outward. So your shoulders are just a means of transfer force. They don't do their own thing. My opinion is that most parts of your body actually just a means of transfer force between your blades and your feet. Because this is why we sit in a rowing boat. It's not about us moving, it's about moving the rowing boat. Okay, so finish. Let's recap everything. We have the half circle finish off movement. So the hands should be somewhat straight. The elbows should be in the almost 90-degree angle towards the handles in a horizontal way. So you don't go like this, you don't go like this, you go outwards like this. And the shoulders stay in a natural position that allow you to transfer force to the outside. You cannot transfer force to the outside if you're too far back. You cannot transfer force to the outside if they're too much in the front, at least not very easily. So you will be somewhat here and you will find this is a quite natural position most athletes don't even have to think about. I'm not going to say that they are perfect in technique, it's just a good demonstration example. Next point, leaving the water with the blades, and then the recovery. The recovery is something where I'm looking for a certain preparation. And from my point of view and from my experience, there's something quite consistent. The recovery is the main part where you can do it all right or do it all wrong. So this is probably the most focused part on from my point of view as a coach. Your hands need to leave the upper body first. In the end, it's not our body that needs to move or do certain things. It's the blade you want to get from the finish position all the way to the catch position. So the first thing that is connected to your blade are your hands. So why should our body leave the finish position first, if it leaves it at all, which we will come to later on? It's primarily, in my opinion, the hands that need to leave, because you want to get the blade up front. So first of all, we have this finish position. We leave the water with our blades. We bring the hands a bit down. We feather. Then we bring the hands away. Very important here, from my experience, bring the hands away with your elbows, and then the shoulders will feel a slight bit of tension, and natural. It doesn't have to be like this, just a slight tension. So this is what they feel right now. They have a bit of tension here and a bit of tension there. And now you see that something is building up in the hamstrings, in the lower back, and in the middle trunk. And this tension is responsible for your ability to pull the boat or not to pull the boat. Right now, we need to bring forward the pelvis quite actively. A good way to do it is to imagine, if you are a visual type of person, that someone pulled your belly button forward. This way, let me stand up here so you can see this. This is your belly. So imagine that someone pulled your belly button forward, and it looks almost like this. This is a slight bit sitting tall on the seat, and bring the pelvis forward, and then you sit up high, but you only sit up high here, not on the shoulders. The shoulders usually stay quite relaxed. So this is very important to separate this all. This point up to the shoulders, to the middle trunk, you sit quite tall and high. If you are a kinesthetic type of person, so you're more, you respond better to feeling things. Try to feel that your pelvis goes forward, and this results in a feeling that you sit more in the front part of the seat. You almost push yourself to the front part of your seat, and you push the edge of the seat almost into your hamstrings a bit. And this will create a certain amount of tension here, and this tension is responsible, if you let it go, that you will feel tension also on your heels. So if these were your feet, your heels will now actually pull a bit down, and this is becoming quite uncomfortable. This is the position when you let the knees now go, what they are doing, you pull the boat towards yourself. So the recovery is to lead into the second acceleration phase. From my experience, there are two acceleration phases, and this is what makes a great difference between being this 1 extra second or 1 or 5 extra seconds ahead in a very tough race, is both if both crews are physically almost equal, which most of them are right now. So the point is to get a second acceleration phase, and the second acceleration phase is right after the recovery, where you create the tension in your hamstrings, in your lower back, in the back part of your legs, and then on your heels. And with your heels, you pull a bit down. Feels like shoveling the boat underneath yourself. So once you have brought your hands forward, you brought your pelvis forward, you brought your upper body forward, there's no further change. The forward lean you have now, before your legs really start to bend and pull the boat underneath yourself, shoveling the boat underneath yourself to the catch, the upper body must not change anymore its forward leaning angle. Why is this so important? It's all about weight distribution. You actually have two main parts where you can put your body weight on, except for the foot stretchers. The first part is certainly your seat. This is where most of the weight should always be put on. The second part are your hands. If you put too much weight on your hands, you become quite dependent. First of all, you become quite unstable. let there be just medium waves outside, you will be quite susceptible to imbalance. But if you sit quite low, tall on your seat, your shoulders being somewhat flexible to any waves or the imbalances, but you're still on the front part of your seat, you have the tension. First of all, you are in control of the boat. And secondly, you sit quite low in terms of distributing your own body weight. The lower your body weight in the boat is, the more stable it is. And this is quite crucial for even team boats, especially quads. I mean, you all know this feeling. You go out in a quad and half of the team says the boat is leaning to the left, the other half of the team says no, the boat is leaning to the right. As a matter of fact, usually it does both, but at various points of time. And one half focuses on this, the other half focuses on this. But this is always the case when athletes put too much weight on the hands. And this usually happens at the recovery. So you see, there's so much to say about the recovery. Let me recap this once more. First, hands lead out. Get some tensions in your elbow and your shoulders, but don't overreach it, just a bit. Then bring your pelvis forward. Create the tension in your hamstrings, in your lower trunk. So this would be right here and right there. And then your upper body does not change forward leaning position anymore. All you do is just let a certain amount of weight on your hands, just about enough to get the blades off the water at the right height. And the rest, all the rest is basically on your seat, on the front part of your seat to be very precise. And then you shovel the boat underneath yourself towards the finish line. This is where you want to go. And this results in another acceleration phase. So many athletes then do something. When they come towards the catch, you see that the stroke here is still leaning a bit forward. This results from automated feeling. It's the fear of being too short. But as a matter of fact, yeah, you might have a bit more forward lean, but consider one thing. We had at the finish, the hands going outward. At the catch, the hands are going outward too. If you lean forward, you will not be able to reach that much more outward reach that you think you get. But what you're really getting is you get a wrong weight distribution, because if you lean more forward when you're already pulling the boat underneath yourself, you depend on stability on the blades. So if you get waves now when the boat comes towards the catch and you reach the catching position, therefore, you're quite susceptible to imbalance. And this usually results in a quick jerky catch that is not effective. So you should not change any position. You should pull the boat all the way. The question is, how quickly am I supposed to pull it? First of all, copy the boat speed and then enhance it a bit. If you pull the boat too hard, you create quite a bit of resistance in the water. The water is much more dense than air, and any drastic change in boat speed will lead, first of all, to more resistance. You don't want to have this. The key with rowing, I believe, is to reach and to keep a certain amount of boat speed and to have as little changes in boat speed as possible. And therefore, we need this second acceleration phase. Otherwise, we only had the pushing, and every push we had to break the resistance in front of the boat and then use it a bit. But if we push and pull, the boat speed doesn't vary that much, and this saves a lot of energy and a lot of power. So now we come to the catch. The guys are pulling the boat underneath themselves. Very important. No extra forward lean, doesn't get you anywhere. Where you are at the catch, when you pull the boat towards yourself, don't lean farther forward, don't try to reach extra. Distribute the weight from your hands on your seat. This is what most coaches call prepare the blade in time. Preparing the blade, and now we come to the next phase, is like the landing of an airplane. If it's smooth water, well, it's great circumstances. You gradually distribute more weight from your hands. You take weight off your hands, distribute it with body tension on your seat. So eventually the plane will land smoothly. It's like your blade coming to the water. And this should be just about in time, so that when you're done pulling the boat towards yourself, the blade is just about this much off the water, a centimeter. Centimeter, that's about a third of an inch, not quite. So And now the blade is about to leave the water, enter the water again. So the question is about the timing. How do you do the timing of putting the blade in the water? Well, the question is, how much time do you have? Probably not even 1 or 2/10 of a second to do this. The problem that most athletes face is that they have to do way too much work in way too little time because they don't prepare in time. What do I mean with this? When you pull the ball towards yourself, you have quite a lot of time to gradually distribute the weight from your hands to the seat so that your blade come towards the water. You can gradually square it. There's no wind. We think about great conditions. And then you have your blade positioned about a centimeter off the water. All you do then is you gradually place it. Dropping it would almost be too rough. Just place it gently. And that placing can be done in 1/10 of a second. But if you don't distribute your weight from your hands onto your seat, you have to do it all in this 1, 2, 3/10 of a second when you change from pulling the boat on the foot stretchers to pushing the boat away again. And this is why a lot of athletes stop the boat at the catch. Again, it's the recovery and preparation. So blade work is a crucial part of it too. The blade needs to be gradually prepared for this. So what do you do in rough water? You do about the same thing, but you do the preparation a bit later, a bit quicker, but just before you have the force change on your foot stretchers, the change from pulling the boat to pushing the boat, the blade should almost already be prepared. And you can do this in about any water condition. There is no water condition that does not allow you to do this that would be considered to be rowable. I'm not a pilot. I just heard once a story that I passed on to my athletes, and I think it's a good metaphor. I heard that Russian pilots are trained to land the plane a bit harder. So the way I was told it works is they don't go smoothly onto the runway, especially when it's quite windy. So they go to the runway a bit, they approach the runway, and the last part, they go quite sharp. They whoop, they really put the plane into the runway. And we can use the same principle for rowing. We prepare. We don't drop from, 200 meters, whoop, all the way down. This would be killing fish. But we approach it, and we do this in a quite fast pace. So the blade goes to the water, wop, wop, wop. You go high, 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 rough water, and then you approach it, tuck, you're in. And most athletes do something like this. They put too much weight on their hands, and if you have too much weight on your hands, you need to do more weight distribution work, and this takes more time, especially because if you do too much weight distribution work at the catch, your body posture will have to change. If you have already, from the recovery, quite a lot of weight on your seat and only the minimum amount of weight on your hands that is absolutely needed to get these plates off the water, there's much less weight to distribute from your hands to your seat. So therefore, this will also be done quicker. And this is why it's so important to bring out the hands first and then sit tall in the front part of the seat, but only with the lower trunk or middle trunk, not with the shoulders. So the shoulder should always, I refer to this as a boxer. You know, a boxer is quite relaxed here, or a biker. They have their shoulders not too cramped, not too tight, they're always ready to move. Yeah, our blades too. If you go like this, you have quite a lot of weight on your seat, only the minimum weight. Usually the arms are enough weight on the hands, and then placing the blade is quite easy. So this is where we are right now. The plate is almost prepared. So I talked about this change in force on your foot stretchers. Well, we pulled the boat towards ourselves, and now it's time to change. Now we push the boat away. And that's one deciding thing. There is no pulling. This is why I think it's absolutely counterproductive to row on standard rowing machines. You lose the feeling of how to row. It's not like us moving. It's not like us sliding forward. It's not us pulling on something. As a matter of fact, we never pull in a boat. I don't believe this. Maybe at the finish a bit. what we do much more is we use the blade as an anchor. So if the blade is an anchor, how do we do this? Take your hand. If you sit now in front of a PC, just use it. And you can bring your hand, you can put your hand through the air like this. There's not much resistance. Why? Because air is not so dense. But have you ever tried to do this in water? Try to do this in water with your hands in the water. It's so hard to do because water is much more dense than air. So we can use this. If we place our blade into the water and if we create a certain amount of pressure on the blade, our blade is quite locked in the water. This is what most coaches call locking the blade in the water at the catch. So this is about right now. But if you want to lock a blade, this blade should not change height. I call it creating a water bubble in front of your blade. Your blade is almost a bit like a shovel. It's round anyway. It's perfectly shaped for this job. But you have to keep the same height now. You have to place the blade, don't drop it, place it at the catch, and then keep it at the exact same height. And then you anchor in front of this water bottle. You use this to propel the boat around your blade. It's not your blade going through the water. I mean, you always have a bit of slip. This is what they call slip when the blade goes a bit through the water, but you can reduce the slip to a minimum. The idea is that you place the blade in the water, you don't change height, you don't change angle, otherwise that water bubble would slip over the blade, under the blade, to the side of the blade. So any change in position or angle of the blade in the water results in a loss of the water bubble. And it's very hard to get it again. If you accelerate your boat past this water bubble anchor, you will gain quite a momentum. This is how you actually accelerate the boat. You don't accelerate the boat by accelerating the blade in the water. This is why rowing tanks don't work. Rowing tanks are nice, but they kill your back. It's so unrealistic. If water is dense enough to use it as an anchor in the boat, how on earth should a rowing tank work where we propel water? Water is so much greater and more dense than any boat weight can possibly have. So right now, they try to use their blade as an anchor, and this is probably the most crucial part, and this is why we need the recovery to be so perfect. If we're now at the catch, and you know many athletes do something, you've already seen this probably, at the catch they lift up their upper body quite a bit. The reason why the upper body is lifted is that they still have to do weight distribution between their seat and their hands. And as the time was probably not enough because they have had way too much weight on their hands, so the distribution time is too long, they still have to do it when the blade is in the water. So it looks like they're pushing the boat, but in fact they're not. They're just lifting. And this is one of the greatest things I always have to explain when people row on a bi-rower first. If you have ever tried a bi-rower, you know that the bi-rower only gives you resistance on a horizontal basis, so only forward, backward. But the water also gives you resistance downwards. And we sometimes cannot make the difference between now we're anchoring the blade or we're grounding the blade excessively. Grounding the blade doesn't accelerate the boat, but it still feels like a bit of resistance, and you don't have this in the bi-rower. The bi-rower forces you to set the blade perfectly, because otherwise you just feel a so-called slip at the catch, play at the catch. So placing the blade now perfectly is the most crucial point, and not changing its height. And what you then do, you put a bit of pressure on your foot stretchers, and you don't have to be all that aggressive. I mean, of course, the bigger the team boat is, the quicker you have to be in doing this, but you can always help yourself adjusting the gearing to be a bit harder. This is what you actually have to do, I think, my opinion, my experience. But that's not a law. So now the blade height should be constant, and what you do then is you gradually, you get the oar to bend a bit at the catch. Then you feel, okay, I'm locked, I have the anchor, my blade is stable in the water, it doesn't change height, it doesn't change its angle, its position. And then you use that as an anchor and gradually pull the boat past that anchor. And the idea is to pull the boat away from yourself. So the point is not to look for a so-called dynamic stroke. If your stroke is too dynamic, and this is what we used from these standard rowing machines, which I think do not work at all for rowers, although many people still use them, but just because they're cheap and out there, I think that's the point. You create something, if you have it too dynamic, you cannot create a dynamic stroke because your boat is quite heavy. You have to carry your body weight, you have to carry the boat weight, and you have to break the quite dense water in front of the boat. Some athletes try to be dynamic at the finish, so what they do is they lift up the upper body too early. This would be somewhere around here. If you lift up the upper body too early, what happens is, in the push, you change height on the blade. And if you change height on the blade, that water bubble is lost. It slips either below the blade, above the blade, beside the blade. So, and then there's not much resistance anymore. You would have to create another bubble, but the boat is already going quite fast. So what you feel then is a so-called dynamic finish, but in fact it doesn't accelerate the boat. You just pop, 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 go through the water with the blade, which is nowhere as effective as constantly using the water bubble you got at the catch and use it as an anchor all the way to the finish. So if you lift the upper body too early within a stroke, what happens is that you lose the water bubble in front of the blade goes through the water, you feel, it's a quite quick now dynamic finish, great job, but it's not. It just feels good, but it's not fast. The idea is to have a quite undynamic stroke. So let's follow this. You see the oars, now I can see it, I don't know if you can see it here with this little camera. The oars are still bending, and the idea is to keep the bending all the way to the finish. My metaphor I use for the finish is not do a quick finish, there's no quick finish. Don't do an aggressive finish. Sometimes you have to help to get athletes a differential learning effect, but as a matter of fact, I think it's just an opening. Because all the way, when you push the boat, you create tension again in your hamstrings and in your lower trunk and upper trunk, and all you do is just you open the upper body. So you add a bit of more movement, just gradually more movement to keep that water bubble. And how do you keep this water bubble? You constantly have the same amount of force on your feet and the same amount of force on your hands. And as long as the ratio, pressure on your foot stretchers, resistance on your hand equals resistance in front of the blade in terms of a water bubble is the same, the chances are quite great that you actually accelerate the boat. So we are now at the finish again. You see not a lot of unnecessary movement. Quite a lot of athletes go a long way to the finish. Usually force curves drop. We see this on the biro quite a lot. Okay, so I'll let this video run now a bit so you can actually see a bit of movement too. One more thing about changing weather conditions. There is a difference between head and tailwind. Headwind conditions are usually more easy to row for many athletes because they're looking for this dynamic rowing feeling. Dynamic rowing feeling is actually the false expression. The reason why it feels more dynamic is you have to add more body movement in order to keep that water bubble, because headwind means the water is going away from you quicker. You're moving against the water is going away from you. The wind is blowing this direction. So what happens is that water is constantly shoveled away from your blade. So you have to add more movement in order to hold on to that water bubble. In tailwind, it's the other way around. Tailwind goes with your boat direction, and it also shovels a bit of water on your blade. So you constantly have a support to keep that water bubble in front of your blade when you push the boat past that anchor. But this feels quite undynamic. But undynamic is not necessarily slow. If you have an undynamic stroke, according to what we consider to be undynamic as a broad spectrum, it actually is more effective. But many athletes are looking for the same feeling in head and tailwind. So considering the fact that in tailwind we constantly get more water shoveled onto our blade in the water and it's just not dynamic, we try to add dynamic movement. So usually this results in upper body, raising the upper body quite early in order to get some dynamic movement, because we want to add some quick body movement. I mean, by now you know it's all the wrong thing, but what happens is you actually create more body dynamics, because if you add the upper body lift too early, you change height in the blade, and what happens then is that the change height in the blade results in the water bubble being lost. Although the tailwind constantly shovels more on it, you cannot really build up some more, especially not towards the finish where the boat is already going quite fast. And then your blade is going pop, 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 pop like this through the water. This feels quite dynamic, but it's not fast. So my tip for my athletes is do never look for a dynamic stroke in tailwind, and just accept that headwind and tailwind feel quite different. It's not the same rowing feeling you have to look for. And therefore, tailwind rowing and headwind rowing are two different things. And your body movement should also be adapted to this. Okay, thank you guys. That's it for today. So I have to be quite fast in order to catch up with Jakob. So this also gives me quite a good workout on the bike, which I can use very well.